Two tiny German shepherd puppies, dumped like trash near a dark, cold tunnel. No food, no warmth, no hope. The man who abandoned them thought no one would care, but what he didn't expect was who would find them, and how their survival would change everything. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this one. This is not just a story about cruelty. It's a story about courage, unexpected heroes, and how even in the darkest places, love can still find a way. The morning was unusually quiet along the rural highway outside Zaragoza, Spain. The fog hung thick over the cracked pavement, curling around the trees like cold fingers. Few cars passed that time of day. It was the kind of silence that made people uneasy, like the world was holding its breath. Just off the shoulder of the road, a tunnel stretched under the highway. Forgotten by most, it reeked of mildew, motor oil, and something worse, something hopeless. And inside, curled against the icy concrete, were two German shepherd puppies, no older than 6 weeks. Their bodies shook, not just from the cold, but from confusion, fear, and the memory of a man's voice, once soft, now filled with rage. They didn't understand the words he had yelled. They only knew the car had stopped, the hands had grabbed them, and then the world had gone dark as they were tossed from the back seat into the shadows. One of the pups, slightly larger, pressed closer to his sister. His name, though he didn't know it yet, would be Sombra, because he would grow up to be like a shadow, quiet, watchful, and fiercely loyal. His sister whimpered, nuzzling her wet nose into his side. She would one day be called Luce, for the light she would bring into someone's life. But right now, they were nameless, abandoned in a place where no one was meant to find them. The days blurred together. No one came. The tunnel echoed with the roar of trucks overhead, but down below, there was only silence, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig that made the pups tremble. Hunger gnawed at their bellies. Their ribs began to show. Rain came one night, flooding half the tunnel. Luce nearly drowned, saved only when Sombra dragged her up the incline with what little strength he had left. They were fading. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On the 5th day, a rusted bicycle creaked to a stop above the tunnel. A teenage boy, about 15, leaned over the edge, wiping sweat from his brow. His name was Matteo, and he had skipped school again, not out of rebellion, but because he couldn't concentrate anymore. Not since his father had died. He pedaled every morning, escaping the sadness at home. As he paused to drink water, he heard it. A faint cry, weak and trembling. At first, he thought it was the wind. Then it came again. He climbed down. The smell hit him first. Then, the sight. Two tiny creatures, barely alive. His eyes widened. One lifted its head slowly, too weak to bark. He dropped to his knees. Oh, Dios mío. Matteo reached into his backpack and pulled out half a sandwich. Sombra lifted his head just enough to sniff it, then collapsed again. They needed help. Now. Matteo wrapped both puppies in his sweatshirt. He looked around, as if expecting someone to stop him. No one came. He stood up, clutching them to his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something much bigger than a rescue. It was the start of healing, for the pups and for Mateo himself. And the man who left them there? He would never imagine the ripple this act of cruelty was about to create. Mateo didn't speak a word on the ride home. The bike wobbled beneath him as he tried to balance the two shivering puppies in one arm, steering with the other. Every bump on the road made Luz whimper. Sombra didn't make a sound. His eyes barely opened. The sweatshirt was already soaked from their tiny bodies, but Mateo didn't care. He pedaled harder. His house sat on the outskirts of town, a modest, weather-worn home with a garden that no one tended anymore. His mother had stopped caring about things like that after his father's accident. Mateo knew she wouldn't notice the puppies right away. She hardly noticed him anymore. He snuck them into the shed behind the house. It still smelled of his father. Oil, sawdust, leather gloves left untouched. He laid the puppies on an old blanket, their bones sharp against the fabric. They needed warmth, food, medicine. Things Mateo didn't know how to give. He ran to the kitchen, grabbed a bowl, filled it with warm milk, and brought it back. Luz lapped at it, slowly. Sombra barely moved. Mateo knelt beside them and touched his ear gently. "You're not going to die," he whispered. "I won't let you." That night, Mateo barely slept. He stayed in the shed, curled near them, checking their breathing, whispering words he hadn't said out loud in months. He told them about his dad, about how everything got quiet after the funeral, about how he didn't like the way the house felt now, empty, like no one wanted to live in it, like they were just surviving. "I think you know that feeling," he said softly to Sombra, whose breathing was shallow but steady. The next morning, his mother found him. Her eyes, tired and sunken, narrowed as she stood in the doorway of the shed. She didn't speak for a long time. Her gaze moved to the puppies, then to Mateo. "Where did you get them?" "They were left in the tunnel," he said, bracing for anger. "They were dying." She looked at them again. Luz lifted her head. Sombra didn't. His mother sighed. "They can't stay. They won't survive if I let them go. You're a child, Mateo." "They need me," he said, his voice trembling. "And maybe I need them too." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked back into the house. He thought that was it, that she would call someone to take them away. But later that evening, she returned with a bottle of antibiotics and a tin of dog food. She didn't say a word, just left them by the shed door. For the first time in months, Mateo felt something shift. Not just in her, in him too. He named the puppies that night. The boy who hadn't spoken to anyone about his pain in weeks suddenly couldn't stop talking. He spoke to Sombra and Luz about everything. His dreams, his fears, his guilt, his loneliness. And in their silence, the puppies listened better than anyone ever had. But things weren't going to be easy, because a storm was coming, not just in the sky, but in their lives. And soon, Mateo would be forced to choose between keeping them safe and keeping them with him. Days passed, slowly, then all at once. Luz began to grow stronger. Her eyes lit up when Mateo entered the shed. her tail starting to wag in slow, unsteady rhythms. She would nibble at his sleeves and fall asleep curled beside him, sighing as if the world had softened. But Sombra was different. He barely moved. Mateo did everything he could, fed him by hand, kept him warm, even played music in the background to calm his nerves. But the pup remained distant, his gaze often fixed on nothing. He refused to eat unless Luce did. He only stood when she stood. It was as if Sombra had decided not to trust the world again unless Luce showed him it was safe. Mateo understood. He was doing better in school. At least, that's what the teacher said. But only because he knew the puppies would be waiting for him when he got home. He ran straight to the shed every afternoon, always afraid Sombra might not be breathing. But there was progress. Little victories. One afternoon, as he was reading aloud from a worn book, Sombra stood and crossed the shed to sit beside him. Mateo's heart stopped. The puppy rested his head on Mateo's lap, and for the first time, Mateo cried. Not from sadness, but from the kind of relief that breaks you in the best way. Still, their little world was fragile. Mateo's mother was trying. She cooked again. She asked about school. She even came out to the shed once to sit with Luce. But grief has claws, and sometimes even love isn't enough to keep it from pulling you back under. And outside their home, the world didn't care that 2 puppies had been saved or that a boy was healing. One gray morning, as Mateo was leaving school, a white van waited near the gate. 2 men stepped out, one in a municipal jacket, the other holding a clipboard. "Mateo Jimenez?" He hesitated. "We received a report about 2 German shepherds being kept on your property." His stomach dropped. Someone had told. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe a classmate. "They were abandoned," Mateo said quickly. "I found them. I'm taking care of them." "They're unregistered. That's illegal. But they're not dangerous." "Son," the man said, voice flat, "we've had incidents. 2 German shepherds mauled a child last year. There are rules for a reason." Mateo's hands clenched at his sides. He didn't say it, but the words burned in his mind. "They're not those dogs." "They're not ready," he whispered. "You can't take them." "We'll come by tomorrow," the man replied. "If the dogs aren't surrendered, there will be consequences." He watched the van disappear down the street, his heart thudding like a warning bell. That night, he sat in the shed, unable to hold back tears. Luce licked his cheek. Sombra watched him, quietly, like he somehow understood. "They're going to take you from me," Mateo whispered, voice shaking. "I can't let them." But what could he do? He was just a boy, and the world had made up its mind about dogs like them. He had one night to decide: run or lose everything. Mateo didn't sleep that night. He lay between Sombra and Luce in the shed, their small bodies pressed against his. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping dry leaves across the backyard like whispers of warning. Every creak in the old wooden boards made his heart race. Dawn was coming, and with it, the men from the van. He had no plan. He had no choice. As the first orange light touched the sky, Mateo quietly packed a small backpack. Inside, a bottle of water, a flashlight, 2 sandwiches, the little blue towel he'd always used to dry the puppies after their baths, and the photo of his father he kept under his pillow. He opened the shed door. "Come on," he whispered. Luce stood first, alert but trusting. Sombra followed slowly, his legs stronger now but cautious, as always. Mateo led them to the back of the garden where the fence had a broken panel. He had never crawled through it before. His father used to tell him not to, but that was a long time ago. On the other side, the woods began. They walked for hours. The path was steep in places, tangled with roots and thorns, but Mateo pushed forward, sometimes carrying Sombra when the trail grew too rough. Luce padded beside him, always looking back to make sure her brother was close. The plan, if it could be called that, was simple: reach the mountains. There was a small abandoned farmhouse near the base. He and his father had gone there once on a hike. It was hidden, forgotten. Maybe it could hide them too. But Mateo was no longer the boy who hiked carefree with his dad. His legs ached, his throat burned. And worst of all, he was afraid. Afraid not just of getting caught, but of failing them, of watching them be taken away and not being able to stop it. By late afternoon, rain had begun to fall. Not hard, but steady. The dirt turned to mud beneath their feet. The puppies were exhausted. Sombra lay down and refused to move. Mateo dropped to his knees beside him. "No," he begged, arms around the pup. "Please, not now. We're almost there." But Sombra's sides were heaving, his eyes glazed, his breathing too fast. Mateo's chest tightened. The sandwich. Maybe it would help. He tore it in half and brought it to Sombra's mouth. The pup took a bite, barely chewing. Luce nuzzled close, whining. Mateo stood and lifted Sombra into his arms again. The weight was heavier now. Each step was a battle. But then, through the trees, the roof came into view. Broken, covered in moss, but still standing. The farmhouse. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and stumbled inside. The puppies collapsed onto a pile of leaves and hay in the corner. They had made it. But as the rain poured harder outside, Mateo looked around at the damp, crumbling walls and realized this was no ending. This was survival, yes, but not safety. And the world wasn't going to forget about them. Sooner or later, someone would come, and he would have to decide, once again, how far he was willing to go to protect them. The rain didn't stop. For 2 days, the clouds hung low over the mountains, turning daylight into a dull gray gloom. Mateo rationed the food, letting Luce and Sombra eat first. His stomach ached, but he said nothing. They were alive. That had to be enough. Inside the farmhouse, water dripped from the ceiling into rusty cans and cracked pots. Mateo wrapped the puppies in his jacket at night, pulling them close to fight the cold. Luce had started to bark softly when she heard noises outside. Sombra didn't bark, but he stood now, guarded, stronger. And then came the sound that froze Mateo's blood. A car. It was distant, but unmistakable. Tires cracking gravel, an engine straining uphill. He jumped to his feet, heart pounding. The road leading to the farmhouse hadn't been used in years. No one should have known they were here. He ran to the window. Through the blur of rain and trees, a black SUV crept around the bend. He had to run. But where? Too late. The door creaked open. Mateo turned, fists clenched, ready to fight. But the man who stepped inside wasn't one of the officers. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was older, late 40s maybe. Mud on his boots, rain dripping from his jacket. His face was hard to read. Luz growled. Sombra stepped between the man and Mateo, silent and still. The man raised both hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. Mateo didn't move. "I'm looking for 2 puppies," the man continued, eyes flicking to Sombra. "German shepherds, left near a tunnel outside Zaragoza." Mateo's breath caught. The man stepped closer. 1 male, 1 female. Maybe 6, 7 weeks old when they were dumped. Dumped. That word stung in the man's mouth. "They're mine now," Mateo said sharply. "You're not taking them." "I'm not here to take them." Mateo narrowed his eyes. The man lowered himself onto an overturned crate. 5 days ago, I got an anonymous message. Said 2 puppies were abandoned. Gave coordinates. No name. Just guilt, I think. Mateo didn't understand. "My brother," the man said, his voice quieter now. "He's the one who left them. He breeds dogs. For money. I told him I'd report him. We fought. He disappeared." Mateo stared at him. "I've been searching for them ever since. To make it right. I didn't expect to find this." He looked at Mateo with something like awe and something like shame. "You saved them." Sombra stepped forward, sniffing the man's boot. Luz sat at Mateo's side, eyes never leaving the stranger. "You're not taking them," Mateo repeated, but his voice cracked. The man nodded slowly. "I won't. But I can help. I'm a vet. I can get them registered, treated, safe. Legally." Mateo hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust him. But then he looked at Sombra, at how he didn't cower, didn't growl, just watched, waiting. Maybe it was time to stop running. But trust comes hard when you've only ever known loss. Mateo didn't answer. Not yet. The man's name was Daniel. Mateo learned this as they sat in the flickering candlelight of the farmhouse, the storm finally beginning to break. Daniel pulled out a thermos of hot soup and poured a small cup for Mateo, who accepted it with hesitation. "I know this doesn't fix anything," Daniel said quietly, "but it's a start." Mateo watched him carefully. The puppies were resting again, nestled together on the old jacket. Luz snored softly. Sombra didn't sleep. He never did fully, but his body was calm. "You said you're a vet," Mateo said after a long silence. "I am. I left the city clinic a year ago. Too much bureaucracy, not enough heart." He gave a faint smile, but it faded quickly. "Now I do house calls, farm rescues, and sometimes track down the mistakes of my own blood." Mateo looked down. "Why would your brother do that? Leave them like that?" Daniel didn't answer at first. "Money," he said eventually. Pride. He breeds shepherds illegally. No licenses, no health checks. Just fast sales to the wrong people. When 2 pups came out with a slight limp and low energy, he saw no value in them. He paused. I wanted to report him. We fought. He took the van and disappeared. But I knew if he got rid of them, he'd do it where no one would look. Mateo's jaw clenched. I looked. Daniel nodded, eyes heavy. You did. The next morning, Daniel returned with his truck. Clean towels, proper food, vaccines, medicine, paperwork, all waiting in the passenger seat. Mateo helped carry the puppies out. Luce wagged her tail. Sombra didn't fight, but his eyes stayed locked on Mateo every step of the way. They stopped at Daniel's clinic on the edge of town, modest, quiet, smelling of lavender and disinfectant. The walls were covered in pictures of rescued animals and handwritten thank you notes. A little bell jingled when they entered. They'll be okay here for now, Daniel said, examining Luce. But you'll need to make a choice, Mateo. If we register them under your name, you take full responsibility. It's legal, permanent, and risky. Risky how? You're a minor. Some authorities won't approve. Your mother would need to sign off. Mateo looked away. She's trying, but I don't know if she's ready. Daniel's voice softened. Let me speak with her. Later that day, Daniel stood at Mateo's door, holding a clipboard. Mateo's mother opened it slowly. She looked thinner, older in the daylight. Her eyes flicked from Daniel to her son. Are they safe? She asked. They are, Daniel said, and they belong with him. But it's your signature that makes it possible. She looked at Mateo. You ran away. I didn't know if you were alive. I had to, Mateo said. They needed me. Her eyes welled with tears. She hadn't cried since the funeral. I need them too, he whispered. She took the pen. Her hand shook as she wrote her name. It was done. Official. Real. Mateo was their guardian now. But as the papers slid into Daniel's folder, Mateo knew this wasn't the end. Because shadows don't vanish easily. And some people never let go of what they think they own. Spring came slowly to Zaragoza. The chill faded from the air. Blossoms opened along the roadside. And in the once-forgotten shed behind Mateo's house, 2 German shepherds lay beneath the sunlight that filtered through the slats in the roof. Luce was already taller than Mateo's waist, full of energy, chasing butterflies through the backyard. Sombra had grown into a broad, stoic figure, quiet but powerful, always watching, always near. He followed Mateo like a shadow, just as his name had promised. But peace has a fragile heartbeat. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel called. Mateo was at school, doodling dogs in the corner of his math notebook. The principal came to the door with a tight expression. There's someone here to see you. In the parking lot stood Daniel, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other clenched around a document. He's back, Daniel said without needing to explain. Your uncle. He wants the dogs. Mateo felt the world tip sideways. He has no rights, Daniel added quickly. But he's angry. He's saying they're registered under his old business, that you stole them. I saved them. I know that, Daniel said. We all do. But he's not letting go quietly. There's going to be a hearing. He wants the dogs seized until then. Mateo's heart pounded. They won't survive being taken again. I won't let that happen. That night, everything came rushing back. Cold tunnel walls, the silence of Sombra's suffering, the way Luz had almost stopped breathing, the fear, the helplessness. And now it felt like they were back there again. Only this time, the tunnel wasn't made of concrete. It was made of courtrooms, rules, and names on paper. His mother was waiting in the kitchen. We'll fight this, she said. Together. And they did. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Daniel testified. The vet logs, the medical care, the adoption papers, they were all on Mateo's side. But Mateo did something no one expected. He stood and asked to speak. He told the story. Not like a child trying to keep his pets, but like someone who had survived something, who had carried life in his arms through the rain and refused to give it up. His voice didn't tremble. His words didn't beg. He simply told the truth. At the end, he looked at the judge and said, I didn't rescue them. They rescued me. And if you take them away now, it will break more than just their hearts. There was silence. Then the judge nodded once. They stay. Mateo didn't cry in that moment. Neither did his mother. But later, when they returned home and opened the gate, and Luz came barreling toward him, and Sombra pressed his great head into Mateo's chest, then the tears came. Not of fear, not of pain, but of something harder to explain. A kind of healing that finally felt complete. Years would pass. Mateo would grow older. Sombra would go gray at the muzzle. Luz would slow down. But their story would never fade. People in town would say, those are the tunnel dogs, the ones the boy saved. But Mateo would always correct them. No, he'd say, stroking Sombra's head. They saved me. If this story touched your heart, remember, courage doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like a boy, 2 abandoned souls, and a promise kept through every storm. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love, real love, never gives up.